So far we spoke about the fact of Zman Cheruseinu, what Pesach is, that it's not a time that we were freed 2,000 years ago. It's a time something is happening now. Just like Zman Simchaseinu doesn't mean a time that we were once happy. It means a time to be happy. Zman Cheruseinu, which is the essence of the day. Chazal, that's how they define the whole Yontif in a couple of words. What is it? It's Zman Cheruseinu. It means we're getting free now. And then we spoke about the three kashas from the Shla. The Shla HaKodesh says, why are we saying so excited that oh, Hashem took us out? Big deal. We're in Golus anyway. And we're going to understand the difference now in a deep way. Number two, that, what do you mean, if Hashem didn't, he had to. He promised he was going to do it. And number three, how come it starts off calling us Avadim? Avadim yinu l'parim Mitzrayim. And then we say, if Hashem wouldn't have taken us out of Mitzrayim, then us and our children, our grandchildren, Avadim, we would be Avadim. No, it says Mishubadim. What does it mean? Yesh levar. She'ikar in Yana shal Galus Mitzrayim, the main focus of what the problem was of the Galus of Mitzrayim, Haya Mashem Mishubadim Hayinu, was that we were Meshubad. What does it mean? That's all meaning. Mashi Yisrael Hayu Mishubadim Sham Legamri B'chol Muhusam. We were enslaved. We were bound internally with our entire essence. L'loi Shum Atzmaos Afilu B'machshava. They got to us in such a way that we didn't even have freedom of spirit. We didn't even have freedom of our mind to realize and to recognize that we're enslaved and to cry. And we see this all the time with addicts. We see people that they get addicted and they say, oh, I really want to change, I really want to change. And they can become so addicted that they lose the rutzin inside of them that I need to change. I need to get out of my matziv. And that's why he says, what was Mitzrayim called? Beis Avadim. Hainu makoim shahafchu boy anoshim la'avadim. What is it called? The place that they manufacture glass? Beis, I don't know what's called. The house of glass. That's called a place. It was not just a Beis Avadim, a place where slaves were held. They were a professional, not like by Hitler where they killed us. No, they knew how to turn us. They were a place, a manufacturing plant that turned free-thinking Anoshim, free-thinking people, into Avadim. Ki mashmois eved he shekom mitziusay mishubedes l'loy kol rishus atzmis. That's what the mashmois, the essence of the meaning of an eved, is that he loses his identity. Like Chazal say, that we were like a uber b'mei behema. We were like a fetus in the mother's stomach that goes wherever, it has no choice. What are you eating for breakfast, lunch, and supper? A fetus, whatever mommy sends down. It goes wherever it goes. We were totally we couldn't do anything ourselves. We had no mitzius. We had no individualism. We had no flag. We had nothing about us was ourselves. We were completely gobbled up internally in our mother's being. With our spirit and our bodies. And actually, I wanted to say Chiddush, that we know that no slave ever escaped Mitzrayim. So what does it mean? That they had the best security perimeter? More than any jail? You could pick the maximum security jail in the world. Somebody escaped from there. So how could it be that Mitzrayim, before they had all kinds of barbed wire, before they had infrared, and before they had all this kind of structures, right? How could it be that no slave ever escaped Mitzrayim? And the answer is, because what they did to people to enslave their minds caused them to not want to run away. They didn't have any guards. They had no guards. They didn't need guards. Because when you can enslave somebody and make them a shubit to you, as we're going to learn about Stockholm Syndrome and all these kind of things that we know are real, then you don't need guards. That's what I think is the chap. And that's the difference between Galus Mitzrayim and all the other exiles. All the exiles that Bnei Yisrael, how do you express what happened in the Spanish Inquisition and all the other exiles? It's expressed very simple. The Goyim were stronger than us, and they made us miserable. But we were never meshubet to them. We were never enslaved to them up here in our minds. And the more that they tried to kill us, the more free we were in our minds, the more we hated them, the more that we would have escaped in a second from them. They were stronger than us, so they put us in gas chambers. They were stronger than us. They herded us around and they took us, fine, they made us miserable. pogroms and everything. True. But they never affected up here. Up here, we were Jewish. Up here, we were Mayach Yehudi. But in Mitzrayim, we were Goy B'Kerev Goy. We were a nation that was swallowed up internally. We were inside another nation. Mishubadim Legamri. We were enslaved completely until Ad Sha'afilu Chelek HaMachshava Ma Ve'eich Lachshav Gam Kein Hoyu Mishubad L'Mitzrayim. Even our thought, our mind, our thought process, how to think, what to think, was all Mishubad to Mitzrayim. And now he's going to bring a proof. What was the beginning of the Geula? It says, what a chiddush he's going to say now. What started the process of Geula was Vaye'anchu. We moaned. So he says, why didn't they moan a week before? Why didn't they moan a year before? They just started to moan? Things were getting worse, progressively worse and worse and worse. January 1st, whatever the day was, Vaye'anchu, we moaned. What happened before that? Before that, the enslavement was terrible. You know what he says? We were in so much pain that we couldn't even moan. Pirish, Mishegia Zman Geula, when the time of Geula came, and Hashem said, okay, we're going to start the process of redemption, and we needed to start that by our moaning, Ozar Lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem helped us that at least we can moan and groan. Ach mikoydem, before that, we couldn't even moan and groan. We couldn't even za'aka and all the dalad l'shoyness. We couldn't even do it. Why? We were completely mishubad, enslaved, addicted. We were totally gone and up here in our mind. We didn't even have a machshava to cry out on the tremendous tsar that we had. I remember when guys came to Home Sweet Home. True story. All my stories are true. And they would come in and they had a lot of attitude. And then after a month or 2 or 3, they would open up to me and they would say, I'm miserable. I'm miserable with my life. I hate my life. I hate the way I'm living. I'm such a low life. And I would say, great. Great? I said, yeah, because you're living like this for a few years and it didn't bother you. Now it's starting to bother you. Now you're starting to have your brain back. You're starting to become free. You're starting to realize that there's more to life than the way you were living, and you're not happy. And that's what's going to make you grow. It is uncomfortable. That's the beginning of the growth process, as we learned in the previous year. The growth process is change happens. What does Dave Ramsey say? Change happens when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm sick and tired. I got to lose weight. I'm sick and tired. I got to this. I got to that. That doesn't make change. But when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, or some people will say hitting rock bottom, then that's what makes change happen. So they used to actually come in very numb. They couldn't even cry over their life not being what they wanted it to be. And then they would get a little healthier. They would have a job and they would go out at night and have fun, and we had a whole program for them. And then when they started feeling better, they would start to cry about their lives. I want to be better. My life is terrible. Chiddush of the NESIVAS SHALOM. That Vaye'anchu started not because the shibud was bad. It was bad before that. But it was so bad that we couldn't even moan and groan and say, get me out of here. Like we learned in the previous year about the guy who falls into the bar amuk. Kolzman, what is the lashon of the NESIVAS SHALOM? Kolzman sheshoymen oisoi tzoyek uboiche. As long as you hear the guy screaming, the guy falls into a 50-foot pit. As long as you hear him screaming, you know that he's alive. And shari ba'akara, he remains in his mindset. He knows what's going on. But if you don't hear anything, he's in big trouble. And we added on a third step. We say, don't worry, coming to get you. And he says, me? I'm fine. You people are crazy. It's great down here. That's the worst level. So things were so bad. Person can go ahead and kick you in the shin, and you scream. A truck runs over your leg. Nothing could even come out. No moaning, no groaning. It was so bad we couldn't even daven to Hashem. We couldn't put together a sentence. We couldn't formulate a tefillah. We went to the therapist and nothing came out. We had no hopes and dreams. We had nothing going on. We were totally enslaved in depth of the gullus of Mitzrayim that they took over, not our bodies. It wasn't about taking away our freedom of movement. It wasn't about physically torturing us. They got into our brains, our mindset. What was the first step of Geula? Was Vayeyonchu. But we couldn't Vayeyonchu, so Hashem, when it came time for the Geula, He began the process by lightening the burden, lightening the addiction from our mind, so we can at least moan and groan and say, this is terrible, I don't want to be like this. Unbelievable chiddush, right? This happens bomb question of the NESIVAS SHALOM. Another chiddush. We all know that we fell to the Mem Teshari Tumah, says the NESIVAS SHALOM. Why? We don't find that they had gzeiros against us, like by communist Russia, like by Hanukkah. Why did we fall in Ruchni? It's just because they enslaved us. What made us turn to be from Bnei Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, the children of the Shiftei Ka, and 210 years later, we are bowing to idols? Why? They never forced us to bow to idols. That wasn't the shibud. Because the fact, the essence of the Metzius, that we were mishubed, enslaved, completely in our mindset, to the Ruach HaMakom, to the atmosphere, Hashafal b'yoser ba'olam, the lowest atmosphere in the world, which was Mitzrayim Erves Haaretz, Hafcha Oisa Memela Liyos Meshukar Memem Teshari Tumah. We were affected. If you go ahead and take an 8-9-year-old kid from Mea Sha'arim, and somehow he gets sent to Las Vegas, nobody's forcing him. The Ruach HaMakom is going to have an effect on him. There's a Ruach HaMakom. There's an atmosphere around us that affects us without Gzeiras Shmad, without communist Russia. We get affected by the air and the atmosphere around us. It affects us as Avius Goyish sich, Christel sich, Yiddish sich. And we see this happening all the time. That it starts off that we find out that there are Goyim that have a new kind of craziness, and then a couple of years later, we have Yiddish kids and Yiddish people also who are like that. We're affected by our environment. And in Mitzrayim, we were completely affected by the Mitzrayim because we lost our own identity. And that was the Galus of Mitzrayim, losing our own identity. Stockholm Syndrome, according to Wikipedia, in psychology, Stockholm Syndrome is a term used to describe a paradoxical psychological phenomenon wherein hostages express adulation and have positive feelings towards their captors that appear irrational in light of the danger or risk endured by the victims. And you can look at Wikipedia for the rest of it, which I'm not going to read now, but there's a concept that Stockholm Syndrome happens, and the person who's held against their will and loses their whole freedom can somehow side on the side of the captives or feel bad for them. Notable example of Stockholm Syndrome. In 2003, 11-year-old Sean Hornbeck was abducted by Michael Devlin. After 4 years in captivity, he was miraculously found in Kirkwood, St. Louis, only 50 short miles away from his home. He wasn't even that far. 4 years. What was so shocking about this abduction was that the kidnapper frequently left Sean free to move around on his own, and yet the boy never tried to escape. In fact, the locals from Kirkwood testified they saw Sean biking around the area on his own, hanging out with friends which he made during his abduction. And he looked naturally content, so naturally content that they never even suspected that anything was wrong. Why didn't Sean, he was on a bike, his captor went to work, left him alone all day, why didn't he go ahead and use his apparent freedom to escape or at least contact authorities or his parents? And the explanation of this phenomenon is something called slave mentality. The captor, Michael Devlin, somehow managed to penetrate Sean's own mind, and he influenced him into keeping himself into captivity. As long as I am fighting your mind and you want to go free, every second I got to watch you. But if I can get into your mindset to make you want to be captive, to make you want to be stuck, I can go on vacation. This is the same thing with the Yetzer Hara. Once slave mentality took over Sean's mindset, he wasn't the same free kid as before, except that he was physically trapped. Rather, his mindset was manipulated to the degree that he completely lost his own identity and control over who he was. He internally believed that he was trapped, and his own mind became his captor. And that is why he didn't scream, try to escape or call authorities. He was 50 miles away. He could have gone on his bike, call somebody, call the police, and gone home. V'zeh shenemar b'Torah. This is pshat in the pasuk. V'gam ro'isi es halachatz Hashem Mitzrayim loichatzim oisam. I have seen the lachatz. We all know what lachatz is. Pressure, anxiety, pressure. Hashem says, I've seen that pressure, that Mitzrayim pressured you. Hainu loirak hashibud gashmi. It wasn't just the physical gashmiistic problem of being enslaved. Elogam lachatz hashibud was in the mind. She'ena shalat gam ala machshava v'gam al dibur, that we couldn't have any self-control over our machshava, our mindset, and our dibur, our speech. Our complete essence became mishubid, enslaved legamri. Kuneged shibud zeh, and about this is what it says: V'yoytzei es ama Yisrael mitoicham. It should have just said V'yoytzei es ama Yisrael l'cheres olam. Hashem took us out to freedom, to eternal freedom. Mitoicham, we were from inside them. Shibud muchlet kazeh kefi shehayu b'Mitzrayim. Such a shibud muchlet, we were in them, we were gobbled up by them, we lost our atzmaut, our individuality. And what happened that we're celebrating? V'yoytzei es ama Yisrael mitoicham l'cheirus olam. We will never have, says the NESIVAS SHALOM, we will never have another galus like that. Ki yitzias Mitzrayim hoisi yitzia nitzchis l'cheirus olam. It was an eternal salvation of cheirus olam, that we will never have the whole Klal Yisrael completely enslaved in our minds to such a level of shibud. That will never happen. And now we're going to explain in the next part how that answers a lot of the questions.